All right, today we are talking about Joshua, the book of Joshua, the character of Joshua. Joshua. So we. You mean Thor, brother of Loki, and then Jaren said the strongest Avenger. We were talking about who's your favorite Avenger. Clearly not the strongest Avenger. I believe Tony Stark made a statement about that in, Thor 3 when he set that up to be Hulk, right? All right, so Joshua. We had been talking about Moses, and then when we last left off, Moses died. And then we took like 2 weeks to talk about the ark, the tabernacle, and the temple, which we're going to kind of see again today, and the law. So we're actually going to dive right into scripture because the scripture we're looking at is actually going to kind of recap where we last left off. So Jaren says that Thor is also Point Break. And Jaren, have you even seen the Point Break movie? Do you even know what that means? I have so many questions. I haven't seen the Point Break movie. That's like an old movie. I think they did a remake actually, but I don't know if anybody watched the remake. All right, so Joshua 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give you, to the Israelites. I will give you every place you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I'll be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give you. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So Jaren said, I mean, like in the Avengers, he said, don't worry, Point Break, you have an ice swing. Yes, that is a reference to a movie. Because Tony Stark, all of his references are movies, right? Like when he calls Hawkeye Legolas. All right, so here, Moses is dead, as we already talked about. See, I'm having a hard time with my setup today just because I don't have the scripture on my iPad like normal. So Moses had been leading them for a really long time, and he brought them to the promised land. Remember, they didn't go in the promised land because people were afraid, so then they had to wander for 40 years, and now they're back to the promised land. And Moses is dead, and Joshua had been kind of like Moses' second in command. And now that Moses is dead, Joshua is taking charge. And God's like, okay, go into the promised land. It's going to be okay. You're going to do great. You can go in. This land is going to be for you. Don't be afraid like you guys were last time. It's all going to be fine because you have my law. You can obey it. We already talked about the law, right? And if you keep this, we're all going to be good. So that's kind of where things start, moving home, if you will, after like 400 plus years gone. Now, Joshua 1:10 through 11. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. So the Jordan was the river. So if you're on one side of the Jordan, you're not in the promised land. If you're on the other side of the Jordan, you are in the promised land. I didn't bring up a map. Let's bring up a map. Maps.google.com. Jordan River. So, if you look here at this map, it's hard to see. This is the Jordan River, I think. Oh, where is it? It should be marked, right? I picked the Jordan River. I'm pretty sure it connects this place and the Dead Sea. Trevor will correct me if I'm wrong. So I think it's in here. It's hard to tell on this map. Yeah, see this? This is the Jordan River, so you can see it. So it's blue when you zoom in. So this, what looks like border, even today, is approximately the Jordan River. So that's definitely what they were talking about back then. So they were talking about everything from like here to here was going to be ancient Israel. And this is a modern map. So there's like modern stuff on it. Then, don't worry about that. And you can take that back. I don't know where the Euphrates is on here, but I think it gave them a lot of land up pretty far north. This is Lebanon, which is clearly mentioned in here. It says the desert, you will extend from the desert of Lebanon, from the great river of the Euphrates. So right now they're basically on this side of the Jordan, and they're going to cross into what would be the promised land. So let's put away the map. So here, Joshua is like, go tell everyone, get ready to break camp, pack up your stuff. We are going in. You have 3 days, and we're going to cross the Jordan, and we're going to now take possession of the land that God has given us. So he's readying everybody to cross the river. But he's not just going to cross the river blind, which we're going to see in the next section. So Joshua 2, 1-7. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman who'd taken the men and hidden them, she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. As soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. So Joshua sends some spies. He's not just going to send all of these people, most of them civilians, into the promised land without kind of seeing what's going on. But he's like, I definitely want you guys to scope out Jericho. So if we bring our map back, where is Jericho? So let's look. Jericho is still there. Right there. Boom. Jericho. All right. So, so if they're crossing the river, they're probably crossing around here somewhere. And Jericho is a big city. Now, it probably is not in the exact same place that Jericho is today, but it's about in the same place, right? So if we were in Sunday school, we would have maps up there too. But so they want to cross around this area, and the first big settlement they're going to run across is Jericho. So Joshua sends some spies in. And he's like, go suss out the land. So they go into Jericho, and there they meet a woman named Rahab. Rahab is the only person other than Joshua who is named in this section. Not even the king of Jericho is named. He's just the king of Jericho, which shows that she's very important. The Bible doesn't often name women. So to have her be given a name and not just be like a prostitute or a woman shows that whoever wrote Joshua, whether it's Joshua or some scribe, probably a scribe or something, viewed her efforts as particularly interesting and worthy of study, that she needs to be called out. But the story also emphasizes her low station here by calling her a prostitute. Whether she was or was not a prostitute, I think is actually still somewhat a matter of debate, and it has to do with like how they didn't really have inns back then, but there were still kind of places you could go. But women who allowed men to stay in their house, whether they were prostitutes or not, like as an innkeeper, kind of got, tainted as prostitutes and called that. But she could have been a prostitute. She could have not been a prostitute. Regardless, she probably was not looked very well upon by the people around her. So Rahab is a Jerichoite. I don't know, a person of Jericho, right? She lives in Jericho. She is a Jericho person. And her king is like, I heard some Israelites stayed with you. I guess her neighbors were very talkative. Um, and so he sends a message to her, and he's like, these men you have staying with them, you need to bring them to me, right? Because they have come to spy on the land, and that's just not cool. So bring the men to me. But what Rahab does is she hides the men on her roof. She hides them under some flax, which flax is it's a plant. You get linen from flax. And so she has a bunch of flax. She hides them under it. And she's like, oh, yeah, those men were totally here, but they're gone now. They knew that at dusk you guys closed the city gate, so they left before the gate closed. So they're not here anymore. But if you go, you might be able to catch them. They didn't leave that long ago. And of course, she's totally lying, right? She is lying through her teeth. So the men go, the Jericho men go to pursue these spies on the road. And of course, the spies are not on the road. They're on her roof. And the gate is shut, and they are shut inside with her. So Rahab goes above and beyond here. Like, she has no loyalty to these men other than the loyalty of hospitality. But hospitality probably only extends so far when your king is like, give me those men, right? But she hides them, and we're not really given a motivation. We don't really know why. Why does she do this? But she does. All right, so let's keep going. Joshua 2:8-14. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is in heaven above and the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and my mother and my brothers and sisters, all who belong to them, so that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us land. So now we know why she's doing what she's doing, right? She's afraid. She spares them because she has heard of what they have done and believes that they will conquer the land. She wants mercy and she wants end. She thinks they're going to come in and wipe everybody out. And if that's true, she wants to be on their side. And she wants her whole family to be spared. And the spies agree to this. All right, so Joshua 2:15-21. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. And she said to them, go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way. Now the men had said to her, this oath you made us swear will not be binding on us, unless when we enter the land you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brother, and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house in the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear. Agreed, she replied. Let it be as you say. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied a scarlet cord in the window. Jaron said, because she has the ultimate power of the Lord, she can do this. I don't think she has any particular power, but she certainly brokers this deal, right? And she lets them down through the window and tells them how to evade capture. So she's living in the wall. I don't really know what that would look like, other than houses are part of the wall. And when they're leaving, they're like, we're going to totes come back and conquer this place, yo, Rahab. And since, this is ye olden days and it's a war and it's not like we're wearing team jerseys, we need to do something so we know that your guys are your guys. So we don't kill them. So you need to make sure that when we come back, your whole family is in your house, because we know where you live, and that you put this scarlet cord in the window so that our bros know this is where you live. And if anyone in your family leaves your house, we can't be held responsible for that. That's just, it's going to be mayhem in the streets, right? So keep them in your house. And if anyone from our group kills someone in your house who's actually in your house, then we'll answer for that. But they say, if you break the deal, all bets are off. It's over. And she's like, yeah, that's fine. Cool. So she sends them away and she ties a scarlet cord in their window. I wonder what her neighbors thought of the scarlet cord in her window. Was she just decorating? They're like, oh, that's an interesting cord, Rahab. So say it like Hawkeye says it in the Avengers. I don't, which quote? I don't know. I don't really like Age of Ultron, so I don't watch it that often. All right, so the next section, Joshua 2:22 through 24. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. Then said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us. I really like that imagery. They're melting in fear. They're quaking in their boots. They're just melting. So they go back to report to their boss, who is Joshua. And they're like, the invasion is a go. It's going to be fine. They are terrified out of their minds. Before we continue on with the invasion, I wanted to take another moment to talk about Rahab. So as we mentioned, she has a critical part in the story. She's one of the few named players outside of Joshua. Her role is so critical that this is not even the last time we will hear her name. She is in the genealogy of Jesus. I didn't actually, let's pull that up. I don't have a slide for this. So Bible Gateway, Matthew 1 through 6. If we look at the genealogy of Jesus, that didn't work like I wanted it to. Okay. You say, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. So not a lot of women are mentioned in this. Even women we know. We know that Isaac's mother was Sarah. We know that Jacob's mother was Rebecca. We know that Judah's mother was Leah. We know these people's mother. But the only mothers mentioned are Tamar, Ruth, and Bathsheba, who's not named, but whose mother had been Uriah's wife. So that's kind of important. Rahab is being remembered forever. She is being tied directly to Jesus. Her actions are remembered, which is pretty cool. I lost the chat. I minused too many things. So, amongst the women named in Jesus' genealogy, one of them is a Canaanite prostitute. So, a woman who is of the of not the Jewish people, not the Israelites, someone they came in to conquer, and who is, not a high position. She is a very low position in society. And all of that just kind of shows us that no matter who you are, no matter how low you might think you've come to be, you can still be part of God's plan, right? Like Rahab, and God can use you to do great things. You don't just have to be King David, right? You can also be Rahab. Anyone can be brave, right? Anyone can be part of God's plan. All right. So, keeping going with the story. Joshua 3:5 through 7. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Joshua said to the priests, Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. So he tells the people to consecrate yourselves. Basically, like, pray, take a moment to make sure, you're clean, you're good with God, that we're all good. Then he says to the priests, take the Ark of the Covenant ahead. We already talked about the Ark of the Covenant, right? Think of the golden ark from Indiana Jones. The Ark of the Covenant represented God's presence among them. So it's kind of like the God is going ahead of them, right? And then Joshua says, God says that after today, they will know that I am with you, Joshua, as I was with Moses. That this wasn't a fluke, and I'm not gone now that Moses is gone, that I am still here. So we're not going to read everything that happens next because there's a lot of details. But basically what happens next is they cross the Jordan River. The Ark of the Covenant goes ahead. And I think the river even stops flowing. I would have to look though. And they spend several days praising God and celebrating. They do Passover. They have other holy traditions because they are finally in the promised land. And they know that it is God who got them there and not themselves. Because at this point, they've been wandering in the desert 40 years. They know they pretty much suck at directions. So they take the rest of their, they take a rest. They've been wandering 40 years. Now it's time to take a rest and celebrate. But then this is the lull before the storm, the rest before they're going to conquer the promised land. Oh, I did have another. We'll read this. So Joshua 3:14-17. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead. Now the Jordan is at the flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zerathon, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all the people passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. So that's what I said earlier, right? It's another parting of the river. It's the Jordan River, not quite as big as the Red Sea. So they can cross on dry land. And instead of a staff, parting the river, it's the Ark of the Covenant because it's God, right? God is parting the river for them to cross. All right, so Joshua 6:1-5. This is after they spent several days celebrating and resting. They are now in the promised land. They're probably not that very far away from Jericho. Jerichoans are probably like, oh my gosh, there's an invading army right there. All right, so Joshua 6:1-5. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horn in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. So the Israelites, they're camping right outside Jericho. Jericho has this huge impenetrable wall by ancient standards. They had what's the word I'm looking for? The thing you put the rocks in. Trebuchet. They had a trebuchet, it'd probably be a different story. But they didn't have trebuchets. This is much older than that. And God is like, hey, Joshua, I'm going to give you Jericho. And then he gives Joshua the craziest battle plan ever. March around the city and the walls are just going to fall down. Right, God. Right. Sure. Why? Why is this the battle plan? Out of all the battle plans? Well, I think it's because we've already seen how the Israelites, sometimes question God's involvement in things. In this battle plan, clearly only God could pull this off. Walking around the wall and blowing trumpet horns is not going to make a wall fall down. Trumpets are not that powerful. I'm sorry. I know I've seen some crazy people try to make it make sense. No. Trumpets are not that powerful. Only God could do this. So it's an obvious miracle. So even though the Hebrews are about to win this huge victory against the people of Jericho, God wants to make it clear that it's not their victory. It's God's victory. So they could not have done it without him. So they do this. They enact the plan. We're going to skip ahead to the seventh day. We don't need to, reenact Veggie Tales here or anything with peas on the wall making fun of them. French peas. It's a funny Veggie Tales. You should watch it. All right, Joshua 6:16 through 21. The seventh time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go in his treasury." When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. So, first off, God's plan worked. The walls come down. Joshua warns his people that this is God's victory and God's city, not theirs. And because of that, anything they get that's bronze, iron, silver, gold, they can't just keep it. They're not pirates. This isn't their booty, right? It's God's booty. And so Joshua's like, if you find that stuff, you've got to bring it back for God. It must go into the treasury so we can use it for things like the tabernacle, right? And so here's one restraint. You go in and you can't just steal whatever you want. Some of the stuff belongs to God. But then he's like, but kill everyone except Rahab and her family. But everyone else, man, woman, child, sheep, cow, donkey, death to them all. It's pretty dark, right? And it can be hard for us. We're like, what? How do we feel about this? We today would say it is not cool to go into a city and kill every man, woman, child. It doesn't say man, woman, and child, but it does say man and woman, young and old. There is definitely no exception for children. Jaren says it's dark. It is dark. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. How do we, as modern people, deal with this? Like, what did that donkey do to you, right? Why does that donkey need to die? What about, a 3-year-old in the streets? You're just going to kill them? What are we supposed to do with this? And the whole book of Joshua is like this. Jericho is not the only city they come across like this. So, next slide. Say what now? Like, what are we supposed to do with this? So we're going to talk about this. There are some theories and there are some thoughts, right? So there are different ways you can take this story. And as usual, I'm going to present them all to you. And I am never going to say if you believe one or the other that it, is wrong, right? Like, there's many ways to view this story. So first off, you can view this as the most traditional view, which is God told them to do this, and this is what happened. And if they hadn't killed them all, things would have been much worse, right? So they had to do this, and this was God seeing a much bigger picture than we are capable of understanding. So that's option A. I'm going to notate this slide as we go. So option A. It happened just like this because God sees the bigger picture. All right, option B. They didn't actually kill everyone, despite what we're told. So they are dirty liars. Why do I say that? Well, because despite what the text says, and in here, it says often in Joshua, Joshua takes the whole land and kills everyone. However, we know later that that's not true. In Judges, we see it's clear that they did not kill everybody because the Hittites and people like that keep coming back. So they clearly missed everyone. So they didn't actually kill everyone. Some people escaped. Though this theory doesn't exactly absolve the Israelites of God of this like seems like murderous intent, right? Of course, I say dirty liars, but that's not really what it is. It's right. They are over exaggerators. You see this really often in ancient literature, which gets us kind of to our next one, which is history. We talked about this when we talked about the Bible, right? What does it mean for something to be historical? We have a very different view of history than people did back then. These books are not history as we like to think of history. We like to think of history as something that someone writes from a purely unbiased frame of mind, just, laying down some facts. But unbiased history is a myth, right? Everything is biased. But at least today we strive towards it. So you might be biased, but you're kind of trying not to be. Or at least there's enough options out there that you can read a lot of different biased accounts to kind of, see the different perspectives, right? But back then, this idea of trying to be objective would be completely foreign to them. So this is very tied to actually option B, which is that they used very hyperbolic language and they were okay with that. They're like, yeah, we totally murdered everybody. And really, they just mean they killed a lot of people. It's like when any of us tell a story, right? Be like, yeah, I totally dominated. Did you? And so what actually happened is probably then that the Israelites did conquer the land. They were successful. God had their back, but they didn't actually completely and utterly destroy everyone, which we know is true because once again, we see these people in Judges again. They keep coming back in Judges, in fact. They're there over and over again, annoying the Israelites, and they're constantly at war with them. Which then, of course, goes back to, maybe if they had just killed everybody, things would have been a lot easier in Judges, right? But they didn't kill everybody because they're over-exaggerators. And, some of them probably didn't want to kill everybody. Yeah, that's an option. So option D. Total destruction is sort of status quo. So the Israelites totally destroyed their enemy, but maybe God didn't actually tell them to destroy everybody. Maybe that's just what they thought they had to do. So when I say total destruction is sort of status quo, I'm thinking of like Carthage. So you guys may not be familiar with the war between Rome and Carthage. I think there were 2 wars. They went on forever. There's the story with Hannibal and the mountains and the elephants. Not Hannibal the cannibal, but like an actual guy named Hannibal. An ancient guy who, came to Rome. He went through the Alps. I think that's right. On elephants. And they like melted boulders. And anyway, it was this long war between Rome and Carthage. And let me show you. Let me pull up the map. All right, so we're here again. Here's Israel. All right, scale back out. So Rome, we know, is here. Carthage is about there. So these people hated each other. And they were constantly at war. And in the end, as the story goes, when Rome finally conquered Carthage, they killed everyone, they completely destroyed them, and they salted the land so that nothing would ever grow there. Because sowing salt into the land would mean you couldn't grow anything there. No one would ever be able to live there again. And I mean, as you could see that image I showed you that had Carthage, it was a ruin, right? There is no modern Carthage. So maybe God didn't tell them to destroy everyone. Maybe God was like, we're going to go in here and we're going to live everywhere. And they're like, we're going to destroy everybody. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Um, but the one that I always come back to is option E. Wow. I love when it automatically changes things. We are not the audience for Joshua. This book of the Bible was not written with 21st century Christians in mind. What does that mean? That doesn't tell us anything about whether God really told them to do this, whether they really did murder every single man, woman, and child and donkey. Whether they were over exaggerators, which we know they were, or, it doesn't mean anything to us. You can be like, what does that have to do with this? We're not the audience. When I say we're not the audience, some historians and scholars think that Joshua was written at a much later time. It was not written right after the sequence of events that was Joshua. That these kinds of stories would have been handed down, right? And Joshua would have been compiled much later, during the time when the kingdom of Israel was disbanded. So under the subjugation of the Assyrians and the Babylonians, which we'll talk about much later. So these are people who have been conquered. The Israelites, they don't have their kingdom anymore. They're being spread out. They're being removed and exiled. They don't have a temple anymore. It's been destroyed. They're kind of losing access to their identity. There's a lot of questions. And during that time, they spent a lot of time compiling what we know as the Old Testament, because there was this whole question of, who are we now? How could God let this have happened to us? If we are God's chosen people, why have we been exiled? If we are God's chosen people, what does it mean that this has happened? And so part of the question of that is, during the time period of the exile, the Jewish people would have felt completely helpless and maybe like God had abandoned them. So writing down and remembering this story, while today this can feel very disheartening and dark to us, we're like, they killed every man, woman, and child, right? To them back then, it wouldn't have been the same thing. During the exile, this story would have been a reminder that God is powerful, that God is capable of defeating their enemies. And if he's not doing so now, if he's not defeating the Babylonians and the Assyrian, it's because what's happening now is what's meant to happen. And it's not because God's not powerful. So whereas to us, this is a dark story, to them, this would be a story of hope to people in exile. So I don't know. Someday when I get to heaven, I'd really like to have a sit down with Joshua and be like, hey, man, tell me about the Canaanite invasion, right? But what we do know is that this story was not meant to be dark. We, in our modern perspective, take it as dark. But during different times, this story would have been a story of comfort, a story of a reminder of God's power, and a reminder that God can have your backs if it's meant to be, but is not always meant to be. So, I don't care which of these theories you fall under, right? And once again, saying they're over exaggerators and the quotations of history, that is not saying that the Bible is not true. Remember, we talked about this before. The Bible is about truth. And people wrote things differently back then. And they weren't writing history like we are today. We talked about this, right? So they're trying to get across a message that they conquered everybody. There was a lot of destruction. You see this also in Egyptian histories, like how they talk about things. Everyone back then is like, yeah, and we were the best and most awesome. So we don't know. Whether you think God commanded this and the ends justify the means, or you think this story is more than a little hyperbolic, we know that God is not commanding us to go murder our enemies. That is not what God means for me, for Jaron, for Trevor, for anyone in the modern day, right? Jesus makes this very clear. So, in fact, one of the misconceptions Jewish people at the time of Jesus had about Jesus was they thought that a Messiah was going to be conquering, that he was going to be a military Messiah, and he was going to come in and he was going to sweep the Romans away off the face of the planet, basically be like a new Joshua and set them free, right? But that's not what happened. He came to be a servant leader who washed his own followers' feet and let himself be put to death so he could save us. So Jesus makes it very clear what we're supposed to do to our enemies, right? Matthew 5:43 through 48. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So maybe Joshua happened exactly like it says. That's possible. And Jaren's like, I don't know, he's way dead. Yeah, Joshua is way dead. Someday we'll get to talk to him in heaven, right? But we know that even if that's what was right then, that is not what we are called to do now. And I harp on this because I was personally not alive, but we, humanity, have seen Christians use verses like the verses in Joshua and Judges to argue for wars. We saw this during the Crusades. We saw this during, other wars and other times, being like, well, clearly we're supposed to go murder all of our enemies. And it's like, no. It's very clearly what we're not supposed to do here. It says, love your neighbor, love your enemy. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And this goes with the Good Samaritan story, right? The story of the Good Samaritan is not about, loving your neighbor who's exactly like you. The Good Samaritan was like the opposite of a person a Jewish person should hang out with. It's about your neighbor being everyone, because that's the question the Good Samaritan story answers, is who is your neighbor? The answer is everyone. Jaren asked, what's a pagan? And that's here. Do not even the pagans do that. So pagan means people who worship multiple gods, generally speaking. So during this time period, that would be the Romans, right? The Romans are pagan. So that's what a pagan is. So yes, we are to do as Jesus commands. I don't know the answer to the book of Joshua. It's very dark. But I do know the answer to today, which is love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. So that is what we are going to be doing. All right. So that is the end of the lesson. So we will now go to prayer requests.